Hey listeners, let's talk about revolutionizing your mining operation with Foreman. This isn't your average management tool. It's an all-in-one solution for reducing costs and significantly boosting your revenue. Foreman brings a cutting-edge dashboard to your fingertips, empowering you with automated energy strategies. This means not only curtailing around real-time prices, but also strategically enhancing your profit margins through demand response. It's about leveraging energy efficiency to its fullest potential. With Foreman, you get a system that scales with your business, inventory management for assets, infrastructure integration, and business intelligence. Foreman elevates the cash flow and production of your entire operation. To see how Foreman can redefine your mining operation standards, visit foreman.mn. With Foreman, you're not just managing a mining operation, you're setting a new standard in the industry.
Accelerated by Compass is the premier accelerator program for Bitcoin mining sites at any stage of development. Our managed services provide expert guidance in site procurement, construction, energy agreements, and mining operations. Compass helps clients meet timelines and expectations for operational excellence, from greenfield to retrofits and everything in between. Don't just mine, excel. Visit compassmining.io now to discover how Accelerated by Compass can power your success.
Are you a retail or institutional investor interested in Bitcoin mining companies? The Miner Mag brings you free data and analysis from all major NASDAQ-listed Bitcoin mining operations to know who stands out. Check out visualized metrics and data-dependent stories at theminermag.com. Cool. Bitcoin mechanic, welcome to the Mining Pod. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Colin, also welcome to the Mining Pod.
Thank you, Will.
The first
Mining Pod appearance as a member of Blockspace.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go. Colin has joined the team. And he'll be on the Mining Pod much more often. Okay, so Ocean, it's what we want to get into today. We had Bob, as I told you, on the podcast at the event, at the launch party in November. That was dope. And now it's 9 months or so past that. It's August almost. So it was November, now it's August. Yeah, around 9 months. A lot has changed, a lot to update. I think we could just start with the classic bio because we have to. It's a podcast, and we have a large listener base on CoinDesk who doesn't know anything about Ocean. But then we'll get into all the nitty-gritty details that Peter McCormick did not ask you on what Bitcoin did, because it's not a mining show. No. We're miners, so we got to talk about mining.
Yeah, fair enough. It'd be good to go into some specifics.
Yeah.
So you mean my bio or Ocean's history?
We do both. We start with you and then do Ocean.
I go into Bitcoin at Occupy Wall Street, and Silk Road and Julian Assange and what was the other one? There was like a four thing. I think it was Max Kaiser. That was it. It was the Kaiser report. Those things got me into it, and I just got, fell in love with it and got deeper and deeper and deeper, and became an active member of the community around the fork wars, I guess, and was one of the BIP 148 people and champions, but from I didn't do a lot back then. I didn't really know how to do it, but that was the beginning of me learning actually how to use command line and stuff like that, and it's been sort of a slow progress ever since then. I was a lot more involved in Taproot activation, and now there's there's contention at the moment, and again, more involved still. So I've just generally been in it. I love this thing. I want it to work well.
Yeah.
There's disparate opinions about what it is, what it should be, what direction it should go in, and and so I don't really want to be a passive participant in it. I wish I could be, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
You were super active in the IRC during the Taproot stuff. I was a reporter at CoinDesk at the time, and I was always scouring IRC for talk about what developers were thinking with regards to speedy trial and a bunch of other stuff. And I quoted you a lot back then because you were always slinging some good takes in the chat. So did you not develop before you started kind of getting into Bitcoin? Were you a developer by background, or you just self-taught?
Zero. Running BIP 148 was the first time I'd ever touched a command line in my life.
Wow.
And I had to have people help me, like LS. Is that IS? No, that's a lowercase L. Okay, literally total noob level. So, but that was 2016, 2017, right?
A while ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and I have the I'm blessed because I get to work with people like Luke and Jason, who runs the backend for Ocean.
Yeah.
And I'm in the tech chat, right? Like, even though I'm like more biz dev and like marketing stuff, but it's also product development, and it does come down to the nitty gritty, right?
Yeah.
And I used to work at Start9 as well, so I did a lot of testing there, and I know what it's like for like normies that into Bitcoin, you've got to run a node. That's the first time you've ever done something that looks like running a server, right? Like, that's not a normie thing to do. And there isn't really a way for normies to do it, right? But if you want to mine and be sovereign, you're going to need to run something that looks like a Stratum server, right? So someone's got to make that plug and play friendly, and they've got to. So, that's the whole point of what we're doing here.
And for those who don't know, Start9 was basically like a Bitcoin node on steroids. Like, you could run like a Tor instance out of it. Am I correct about that? It had a bunch of other things bolted on for kind of self-sovereign use of different web applications.
Yeah, it's really just run a personal server. It's like, obviously Bitcoin node is like a fantastic way in which we like bridge the gap for normies, right? Like, as I said, like Bitcoin Core is the first time a lot of people will have ever run server-side software in their life.
That's true.
Same with a Lightning node, because these things need to be on all the time for your apps to connect to them. Doing it on a laptop isn't really ideal for Bitcoin Core, and a Lightning node on a laptop really sucks because it really does need to be online all the time if you want to like, if you want to do it the right way, and if you want your like Zeus on your phone to connect to a back end, it needs to be on. It can't be your laptop, right?
Right.
So, but it does like cloud storage and password management and all those kinds of things you'd want to do as well with your own like personal server. So it's a cool thing. There's Umbrel as well, which is a lot more well known. And then you've got like loads of others like MyNode and Raspberry Blitz, and like there's a lot of little projects of that nature. But
so the kind of like self-sovereignty ethos of Start9 and that whole everything that you were building there, would that like kind of lend to an easy transition into Ocean? How did you find yourself at that job? And also, what does Ocean do for all of our wonderful listeners?
So that's the so it did lend itself because we do Lightning payouts, but we do them like using as natively as you can, right? So we pay out, they got to generate a Bolt 12 offer that is within the offer links itself to the address that people mine to on Ocean, because there's no accounts, right? They don't just like log into an Ocean account and say, I want Lightning, use this LN URL or some horrific like solution like that. It's done without any account, so it's done using signed messaging. So on Ocean, there's no accounts. You just put a Bitcoin address in your miner and then put a Stratum URL in where you'd normally put that in a miner, and then you'll just see shares show up on the dashboard of what's going on the Ocean side. But there's no account. They're all public. It's all auditable and it's all transparent. So there isn't really a pool that operates like that at the moment. There's a lot of trusting and not verifying. In fact, I'd say we're the only exception to that, with maybe like some small caveats to things like public pool and P2 pool and stuff like that. There's some transparency there, but that's not really a scalable approach, particularly P2 pool, right? Like that would be, in a perfect world, everyone would just use P2 pool, but we know it doesn't scale. It's like much harder than something like Bitcoin to scale.
And could you expand on specifically like how Ocean differs from other mining pools? Because I think this is an important component to like why Ocean exists and the kind of function it's trying to serve amid the rest of the mining market.
Sure. So what I found was that you have don't trust verify, and you also have not your keys, not your coins. These are like tropes we have in the HODL space. They didn't really cross over into the mining space at all, because you can pay miners in your block as a pool, and you're limited to around 16 outputs if you're working with stock Antminer firmware. But we use all of them, and we start from the top down. So whenever a block is found on Ocean, the minute those coins exist, getting paid out from the generation transaction, the Coinbase transaction, those coins are the miners already. Around 90% of what gets mined is already in the pockets of the miners, right? We don't touch it ever. The minute it existed, it was already belonging to the miners. That's important, right? Because if you compare that with how few pools there are, the fact that we found out that Bitmain under the hood is running a lot of these smaller pools, right? And they share a custodian. You have Foundry's, the output address used in Foundry's blocks, and then you have ant pools, and then you have the whole Kobo umbrella that's like 10 pools are all paying out to the shared custodian. Long story short, it means all newly created coins coming out of the blockchain are going into 3 pairs of hands ever. And then on the way in, there's 3 entities deciding what goes in the chain. So Ocean comes along and we add 16 to the first number, which is like, it shouldn't have been that impressive, but in the context, it's pretty amazing. Like, we've just added 16 new people to that list, right? So yeah, like 90% of all coins are going to the same 3 pairs of hands, and then Ocean comes along and there's another 16 in that list, which was cool. If it ran the way firmware used to run back in the day, then the largest Eligius, which was Ocean V1, the largest output they ever did was 903 outputs in a block. So that was 903 miners getting paid with no input, right?
And this is specifically
coins.
a firmware constraint. So like you could you could create firmware for modern like for an S21 that would do this.
Yeah, it's a limitation of stock Antminer firmware, and I think Avalons don't like it either. But as I said, it's just stock. So if you're running aftermarket firmware like Brains or Vanish or Lux OS, all of them are fine. But we have to run at the speed of the slowest man. We can't pay out more and then have, we can't brick someone's Antminer because they decided to mine on Ocean. So we have to work with them. But actually, I don't know when this gets uploaded, but we'll probably have implemented our workaround pretty soon, which is we intuit from the user agent what you are. If you're a Watts miner or if you're using Brains OS, we'll send you a big coin base. But if you're stock Antminer, we'll send you a small one. And the miner won't care about the difference. They're still pointing to the same Stratum server. So it won't make the user experience more complicated. And then you'll start seeing some Ocean blocks. Every time a Watts miner finds one of our blocks, it will have like probably 60 outputs in it or something, because you still need to be above the threshold. And right now, like smaller miners, they'll only get 40,000 sats a block, and we don't want to be creating UTXOs that small because they're useless. So that's pretty much, that's one big difference, right? Is the payout. The other is the transparency, right? So we have our block templates visible and our mempool policy published. So in theory, you can just mimic it. You can say right, this is what should be in Ocean's blocks, and I don't like it. And a lot of the heat we caught and a lot of the controversy at the beginning was only because of that transparency, right? Like if Luxor, before the first inscription block, you remember that giant JPEG block that was kicked off the whole thing? If they'd have said, we're planning on doing this, a lot of their miners might have gone, I don't want to do that. Or others might have been like, that's super awesome that you're doing that. But they just sprang it on the network as a surprise, right? And we had miners join Ocean specifically because they're like, yeah, that pissed me off that they did that. So a lot of the heat we caught about our mempool policy and what would be in our blocks was before we even found a block. And we're like, right, so it's the double-edged sword of transparency, right? Like, it's not that we love what goes in via BTC's blocks or Brains blocks or anything like that. We just have no idea until they show up. So that level of transparency we thought was really important. But then, I mean, all this is insignificant in comparison to miners making their own templates. That's the holy grail of decentralizing Bitcoin. It's one of the most centralized things in the whole space. And we're pretty much there. I don't know when this will be uploaded, but we're in alpha already.
Okay.
So we're close with that.
So this is actually a place I want to go with the podcast. I'm glad you brought it up early. The ordinals thing was obviously explosive beginning of this year.
Feb 2023 is
time is slipping by.
February is when it really started
quickly.
kicking off, but Q4 of last year is when things went really nuts with BRC20s.
So there's the ordinals deal, which obviously you guys were in the mix of, and lots of tweets. But underlying issue throughout this whole time was Foundry and Antpool are building all the templates for everybody basically. Was that the larger motivation for you guys compared to the ordinals, and how do you think that whole event?
I mean, they're contradictory motivations.
Yeah.
The whole anti-spam thing is a consequence of us being in a position we fundamentally don't want to be in. Yeah. So we're saying, here's how our blocks look. Yeah. Obviously, we fix the bug that allows people to route around data carrier size. Yeah. Obviously, that's there for a reason. This was all kind of obvious to us, and we were going to run knots rather than core, just it's Luke's pool. That was all kind of obvious to us. Yeah. At the end of the day, it was a thing we're proud of doing, and it wasn't part of the launch. and it looked like something we were trying to do surreptitiously, and it was characterized as that. And I'm saying, well, then that's not going to work, because a lot of you have been furious about it before we even found a block. So we're not trying to do something underhanded here. But the conversation in the community was just not there, and everything happened upside down. And the narrative has changed a lot now, and a lot of people have understood, I get why you're doing what you're doing. Like, a lot of people straight up didn't understand that you have spam filters in Bitcoin from the beginning. That's a thing, and it's not. There is a pragmatic difference between censoring valid transactions and arbitrary data injection.
Yeah.
Like, these are not the same thing, though if you go philosophically out enough, they are identical, but at the same thing, like, you have an email account and it's only usable because we have this concept of spam. We can't like strictly define it, but you can't abandon it either. If you do, then email's unusable and your phone never stops ringing, and like, same with Bitcoin. So I'm not saying there's some technical definition of spam or anything like that. So you'll notice most Ocean blocks at the moment have runes in them, which is a small amount of op return, because not all spam is created equal, right? And when it came to fixing, putting TypeScript under the umbrella of what data carrier size contains, that was a no-brainer, right? And it wasn't that you can't do it, it's just that it needs to be 83 bytes, just like all the op returns do that ever end up in blocks. And again, that was just like, the conversation was not at that point ready for people to understand that. So we're saying you can still do it, it's just it needs to conform to the limitations that have always been there for everything else. Well, not always, since the op return wars. So, but it's at odds, like you make the exact right point. It's at complete odds with us saying we want miners to go with what's in blocks. That's the fundamental goal here. So if you want to be Marapool and do Slipstream, and you want to come along and mine on Ocean and do exactly the same thing you've been doing, because you're still making your templates, but reducing your variance, that's kind of a no-brainer, and we're permissionless, so we can't stop you. So go ahead, and it's the fundamental mission. But by the way, we also think if you fill up blocks with JPEGs instead of people using it for financial use case, that's probably going to have a negative consequence, but it's a little subtle, but I mean, it's important, right? Like, shitcoiners don't really care about node count. Like, that's why they're shitcoiners. That's why their decentralization thing is a LARP, and why Bitcoiners get to go, no, we're better, we're maximalists. To me, the only reason we got to make that claim is because we have widespread enforcement of the rules of the network. And if you're just going to dump JPEGs on them and treat them as like some abusable resource that can just store, become unpaid cloud storage and go, so what, I paid the fee to the miner, like, to me, it's naive. Like, you will end up in a culture that people go, well, the nodes don't really matter that much, they'll just run whatever happens. I don't know if that's true, and we fought a war over making it as technologically cheap to run nodes as possible, right? Like, that was the main crux of the fork war, right? Like, we can't have terabyte blocks, because then it will just be another centralized payment processor. It will be PayPal 2.0. And they did admit it, right? Roger and those guys were like, if we risk becoming PayPal 2.0 to make the base chain accessible to everyone, I think the risk is worth it. And that was just not true, right? That's a terrible argument. So whether spam manifests that way and goes that bad, I don't know. A lot of people are like, oh, it'll burn itself out. And to be fair, it kind of has. We're left with the least harmful form of it, which is just this op return stuff. It doesn't bloat the UTXO set, because you'll just send like a UTXO to another address of the exact same amount with an op return as well, and they're provably prunable. So I'm kind of glad we've ended up with that. The Taproot wizards and the stamp spam and all that crap has kind of died. And none of them like each other either. They've all been stabbing each other in the back. Like, Jameson Lopp destroyed testnet just to mess with Casey Rodamore's testing, which is really annoying, because we're trying to use testnet for our template production. Francis Pouliot was trying to use testnet for Bull Bitcoin Wallet. There was some other people trying to use it, and he just came and destroyed it completely. And now we're using testnet 4 because he broke testnet 3, and there's no transactions on testnet 4, so it's not a realistic environment to test in. So we had to like waste time making millions of transactions on testnet 4. So I don't know. That's a brain dump. Like,
No, it was great. It
Like,
was great.
that's the part I didn't touch yet. So,
Yeah.
template miners making their own templates. Yes, I may not agree with what you will put in your template, but I will die for your right to do it. Right? That's the deep principle here.
Okay, for
Yeah.
Ocean, like when you guys
Yeah.
were coming up with this, it wasn't just like let's bring back Luke's pool, let's start a new business. It
Yeah.
was we want to help decentralize template construction.
Yeah, that's
and then
it.
the spam thing was kind of a sidecar to that mission.
was ancillary.
Or ancillary. Okay.
Yeah, it was just a thing that felt like a no-brainer to
Yeah.
us. But this is Luke and like his relationship with the rest of the core development team, right? It's always been like this, right?
Yeah.
There's like a little club, and there's like based weirdos that aren't really in that club.
Yeah.
And like, because I mean, forcing SegWit through and all that wasn't core, right?
Yeah.
It was a rogue group of people that everyone laughed at, and Jihan was like, "This is stupid," and then Luke threw his weight behind it, and then it happened. But it was never endorsed by like Maxwell and Wooler and all those people. They didn't want to touch it, and I actually understand why. But well, because they don't. It's just like core don't want to be. We don't want people accusing it of being like a developer activated soft fork.
Yeah.
Like it can't be that. So they always pass the buck to the miners. And we don't want miner activated soft fork either, because they're supposed to be employees of the network. They're not supposed to tell us what the rules are. They're supposed to obey the rules enforced by the nodes. But I think it all works. Like I've felt like this for years. Like I think it's just, if you want to activate it, core put all the logic in. They put the activation logic in as well. And then they release some toothless client that doesn't enforce anything and says, here, miners, you activate it. And then the miners play politics with it and get too big for their boots for a while. Then the nodes come along and give some teeth to the activation logic in the core client. That's how it worked with SegWit. That's kind of how it went with Taproot too, depending on how you look at it.
I think with Taproot though, it's like the miners were less consequential. Like because with SegWit, you actually had like the chance for a huge contingent of the mining industry to not go with SegWit and to instead do 2x. And I think with Taproot, it was so much less controversial that for the miners, it was honestly kind of just like, kind of just like not a victory lap for the people who wanted to activate Taproot, but it was just kind of like an assurance thing. Like Speedy Trial was really just, let's make sure no one's going to fuck up and not signal. And then we have some sort of split. Like, I don't think it was that controversial. And I think for most miners, hard to get them to understand why they should care about a soft fork unless they're hardcore Bitcoiners, because the vast majority of hashrate doesn't know, a shit for a shingle when it comes to like UTXOs and like other
Agreed.
things that are super technical. So
yeah, I agree. There's definitely a big disconnect between like the technical like depth in the mining world. Like most miners are really dealing with electricity and utilities and
they've got 1,000 other things to worry about
Yeah.
that aren't the architect. That's not the architecture of the actual Bitcoin network.
I mean, it's like the best demonstration of this is like, imagine if Bitcoin Core was like closed source and we found bugs in it and backdoors and stuff. And there was some central company that were like, oh, that was an accident. And we just carried on using them. That's all mining firmware.
Yeah.
That is like, even like the, even the aftermarket firmware is all still closed source.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
even the people that sell hardware that you need to be able to run their version of the firmware, they still keep it closed source. And I'm like, you sell hardware, you've figured out the monetization element.
Yeah.
Like you could just open source that in 5 minutes. They still don't.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure there's a good reason for that and some gotcha there that I haven't thought of. But like, it's just like I'm just saying that it doesn't cross over, right?
No.
Like I'm hoping Dorsey's block miner that comes out next year. I don't know why the quotes there. I don't know. I'm really hoping they open source it. They've said we're open sourcing what we can, so hopefully that will blow the lid off all of it. Like, and Luke wrote a lot of the CG minor stuff back in the day and forced it all, which like or copyleft, right? So it's supposed to be if you use this, it has to remain open, like on an ongoing process.
Yeah.
And Bitmain were like yoink and closed it all, and he was like, screw you guys, and that was the end of like good faith, like collaborative development in the mining space. It was dead. From like 13 years ago. That was
It's
the
the
end
same.
of it.
Everyone has like the dev fee, and that's always like a topic every conference you go to. So interesting. Okay, I'm glad we got that part on. I want to talk about a little more topical, if you will. So Swan has been with you guys off and on. They had some layoffs last week and changes, and there's hash rate change for you guys as well. first, any correlation with that? And two, just to branch out from there, how are you thinking about business development with Ocean? Like, how do you go about these things?
So Ocean's pseudonymous, right? And there's no identity system in it. It's not private, it's public, but it is pseudonymous. Yeah. So I can't talk about who does and doesn't mine with us. No one ever officially confirmed or denied anything there.
Just tweets.
So
Just tweets.
I will say that Swan having like a blow up on Monday and Ocean's hash rate falling a lot are not related like everyone has assumed. I'm denying that. I'm not saying I can't.
You heard it here first. Denial.
But this isn't live, right?
No, it's not live.
All right. By the time anyone is watching this, then unless you're putting it up tonight, it will be we'll be back above an exahash.
Move. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's like miners have to curtail, miners have to refurb stuff. It's just a coincidence. But yeah.
Okay, cool. But from a business development standpoint, I'm interested to hear how you get to move people over. This is a thing that we've talked about with Foundry. They had their financial services that they offered for miners in 2020. They had like a ton of what's miners that they're able to offer people and get them onto the pool. And then they obviously with TCG, they have just a lot of levers. And then for Ampool, they use...
Well, they're Bitmain Mafia, so...
Yeah, Bitmain Mafia is like a discount, which I think they're running until last summer. I heard that's not running anymore, but discount on units if you're using their pool. Yeah. And then just kind of, I don't know what else is happening with them, but some sort of other business relationships. So I'm curious from your guys' standpoint as Ocean, like what is the thing besides ideology that can move people over that you're thinking of?
Money.
And
that was insane.
Yeah.
Because Ocean there's a list of things and I'll probably forget something.
Yeah.
So everyone knows about the spam, right? So there's a spammy inscription out there that's not getting in our default template, right? That's some money that isn't there. We got super unlucky in December 2023 and we didn't find a block around the halving when it was the highest fee environment ever. We're running below 100% luck at the moment, though we've reconciled to 100% a few times in our history. I'll come back to that because that's really important for a pool like ours. If we're running below 100% luck, that's your problem, and that might be a result of our incompetence, but that's not a thing.
Yeah.
For now, we're below 100% just because variance. And we found 3 empty blocks in the space of the first 30. Now, ignore that they're empty. The reason... if you find 39 blocks, I think it was, and 3 of them are within like 5 seconds of the prior network block, that is statistically incredibly unlikely. It's extremely good luck, but it's such good luck that it actually manifests as you not having some transaction fees. So all of these things should mean miners are taking home less than with comparable pools.
Yeah.
The thing is, there aren't comparable pools. So we've had 5 confirmations now from our biggest miner downwards that they are earning over 10% more than they are with the same hash rate pointed at FPPS pool 1, FPPS pool 2. I'm not going to name names, but the big mainstream pools. I will say that the second best pool for payouts was Foundry, and it's still way below what Ocean's doing. And so keep in mind that everyone thought, oh, it's an ideological pool, but you're going to make less money with Ocean. It wasn't just like inaccurate. It was like laughably, insanely the other direction. Because as I said, we're below luck. We keep finding blocks without any transaction fees at all. All of these, and not finding any blocks in December or around the halving. There's millions of dollars there that didn't get made. All of that should have meant we're at least on par. Like we know there's a little bit of screwing around with, the other pools, but I just didn't realize it would be anything like that bad. So the miners that have come with us, one of them just said, look, it's a little secret. We don't really want to go public with the data because it's a real advantage we have over our competitors.
Yeah.
But there's no free lunch, right? Ocean has insane variance. So you might go for a week without a block. And then we've had 4 in the space of like 30 hours once, which was insane, right?
Yeah.
It all converges on 100% ultimately anyway. But right now, Ocean's hash rate is low to the point where it's genuinely not realistic for some miners. And I'm being hesitant. Our approach as a business development angle is find larger miners that can come and deal with the bootstrapping issue. This is why you can't just have infinite pools and decentralize Bitcoin that way, because you actually need to have a certain amount for it to be viable. Yeah. And we're not viable for a lot of miners yet. We are viable like for anyone with reasonably low time preference. Like if you have to pay a power bill once every month, you'll be all right. Yeah. You might have 1 month where you're like below water, but you'll be all right the next. most likely.
Yeah.
And the 10% minimum improvement over other pools is going to be a nice sweetener to that as well.
Yeah.
So it's the low time preference pool, I would say. But after, I don't know when you're uploading this, but after this conference, I'm expecting a few of the things that we've been working on for a while to finally bite. Getting above 2-3 exahash puts us in a position where we're viable for 99% of miners.
Yeah.
And there's still variance, right? It'll never be FPPS. Actually, well, we'll talk about the share market soon.
Yeah.
Because what we're doing actually will be much less variance than even FPPS ultimately.
Yeah.
But that's far away, so I'm hesitant to talk about it too much because it's a product that's not ready yet.
Okay, like months out or
months. Yeah, definitely months. Even we need to do work on the Lightning protocol itself, like for it to actually be viable.
Okay.
But for now, mine is like ideologically, it's one of these weird things. It's kind of like Bitcoin itself. Like there's a lot of ideological miners on Ocean that don't want to put junk in the chain or just appreciate the transparency, etc. But they're also just making more money as a result.
Yeah.
So the ideology and the financial thing actually line up. So it's just like if you want to be a Bitcoiner and you don't want a shitcoin, you're not going to get rug pulled. You're actually going to do great. It might take longer. So it's not like the usual self-sacrifice, earn less money to do the right thing. It's not that. Like in the context of Ocean versus this tiny FPPS cartel, we're way more lucrative because there isn't really the kind of competition that it looks like, and FPPS is just the ultimate free lunch fallacy.
Yeah.
Like I can mine and the pool can find 0 blocks and I'll get paid no matter what. Yeah. Like if you think anyone is going to offer a service like that and not charge you loads of invisible commission, that's naive. Like these pools don't have anything like someone's got to foot the bill at the end of the day. And like the most transparent example of it was Brains, right? Because Brains, this is why I talked about Ocean's 100% luck, because in a pool like ours, if we don't find blocks, that means the miners are dead, right? We have to find blocks. FPPS sort of says, don't worry about it. We'll pay you no matter what. So if we're incompetent and we don't know how to generate valid templates or something and you mine them or we're attacked and we're not finding blocks as a result of that, that's our problem, right? We'll pay you no matter what. Yeah. But that's sort of a false sense of security. So here's what happened with Brains. They had a variant of PPLNS called Score. And Riot famously left them because they were like, we're just not getting the rewards we expect. And it looked like Brains was under attack because they weren't. Statistically, it was pretty ridiculous how unlucky they were. And then when Riot left, they got way, way less lucky. So it was like the attacker forgot to dial back the attack as a percentage of the overall pool. And everyone was messaging Brains like, hey, there's a block withholding attack or whatever. And they just, in the end, they just switched to FPPS. And that's like their way of saying, don't worry, miners, our luck is now no longer your problem.
Yeah.
But the ramifications of that were, shit, we actually didn't fix our problem. And now we have to borrow loads of money from Bitmain because we keep getting our head underwater. And that was evident in the fact that they don't make their own blocks anymore. So Brains blocks are full of Antpool accelerated transactions. Yeah. As far as I know, Bitmain are just constructing Brains' blocks for them. So it's basically, if you mine with Brains, you pay, a percent to them, and you don't need to go through Antpool's KYC. That's basically why you'd use that. But it's like it's a white label or a proxy pool, we call them. And it's great for Bitmain because they get to have these pools in loads of debt to them. They get more block space, but they don't need to look big. Like Antpool still gets to look like it's only 25%. If you took all these little proxy pools and added them in the pie chart to Antpool, they'd be way above 30%. And you can start 51% attacking. Once you get to 30%, you just can't be a perpetual success. So we have this illusion of decentralization. And this is why I say like pools running below 100% luck, miners being like, not my problem, the pool will just go bankrupt. I'm like, it is actually a problem for all of us because they all start borrowing from Bitmain and then Bitmain gets to control. They already control all of the hardware, right? Not all of it, but like 80 to 90% is all Antminer firmware, right? Yeah. We know it's all backdoor. We know it's closed source. And they basically run most of the mining ecosystem. And if it wasn't for Foundry, Bitmain would basically be just 100% of the hash rate, like with some like also ran kind of things. So yeah, Foundry is like valiantly the one thing that is an independent entity.
Ooh, valiant. He's defending Foundry.
Well, I mean, look,
Kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
like you can put. Look, I like Foundry. I think I would never approach anything the way they do. Like, if you want to mine with them, they got to come and inspect your facility, and they got to KYC you like multiple times.
Yeah, they're the institutional pool. You know,
Yeah.
they're the buttoned up guys.
I don't like it on a level where, like, if government wants to hold a gun to the head of some entity and have a lot of influence over what goes in the blockchain and what comes out of it, they have Foundry there as like the most regulated blue-pilled entity ever. But I just, on a personal level, like, intentions matter. I don't think anyone in Foundry wants to operate that way. I think they're just pragmatic and like, well, we got to do it.
This is our edge. This is how we have to do it.
Yeah.
Well, one question I have for you is, remember Megapool? Remember them?
Megapool.
Megapool, they lasted about like 3 weeks. So they
You mean Pegapool?
Pegapool.
Right, yeah. That was all like environment, like, we're good for the environment. Like,
Yeah, but they were FPPS too, I think.
Yeah.
And they came out, spent a ton of money on marketing for like,
Ungodly amounts of money.
yeah,
on
I wish they
marketing.
would have sponsored the podcast. Should have charged them a lot. Yeah, they came out of the gun, were really unlucky, but charging FPPS, and then went bankrupt within like a matter of 2 weeks. And then I think that also happened to Titanpool for a second, and I believe they came back from it. Just, I don't know how they did, but they had to shut down for a little bit. Is it easier to launch a pool doing your guys' method where you're only doing payouts when the Bitcoin network rewards you, and then like later you're able to scale to a different model? Or
So
how would you think about that?
interesting. Yeah, good question. So launching a PPLNS pool,
Yeah.
or Tides is what we're calling our version of it.
Yeah.
But it's basically PPLN.
It is, but PPLNS was never done without any sort of resolution loss. So on Tides, every single share is counted. And that every other pool will do some sort of approximation where they compress down what the miner does because they just can't deal with that sheer amount of data. So like the back end is just unbelievably clean. It's all in C in assembly. Like, I genuinely, this was one of the fun things in the investor calls where they're like, yo, if Ocean's such a good idea, won't everyone else just do it? I'm like, I'm not sure like they could. Like, it's really, like, you plug it in, it's like terabytes every couple of seconds of data.
Sheesh.
It's unreal. Like,
That's cool.
everything is getting tracked.
Yeah.
And nothing's getting lost. Like, the idea of wasted proofs of work being submitted to a pool is kind of not good enough.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, at Satoshi level, you're going to have to do some rounding, but, you know, we're just doing it properly, right? So I think, back to your question, to launch it, PPLNS is just much harder for miners at the beginning because you have to wait weeks for blocks instead of days or hours. That's just the whole point of mining in a pool instead of solo mining is to reduce variance. So the lower the PPLNS pool hash rate is, the more variance there is and the closer you are to solo mining. So that sucks. Undeniable. FPPS is different, right? In theory, it makes no difference how large they are. In practice, that's obviously not how it works. So I don't know if you guys know Orange Surf. He's one of the people that works for Mempool Space. He's like he's like the concierge.
That's his Twitter handle.
Yeah, Orange Surf BTC, I think it is.
Okay.
He did a really good blog on a topic that's too complicated for me to like TLDR here, but it's like, how much money do you need to be an FPPS pool, and what's the ideal hash rate? And his conclusion was 30% is ideal. If you get more than that, you need deeper pockets again. If you got less than that, you need deeper pockets. I like that you just brought up Pegapool.
Yeah.
And because SBI Crypto is another fairly independent FPPS pool, from what I've seen, all these pools are getting attacked. We know some of the mechanisms via, like, the one everyone knows about is block withholding, right? Like, mine on a pool, don't tell them when you find a block. Pool then has bad luck, but still has to pay you because you keep submitting valid shares. Pool goes bankrupt. But in reality, pool borrows more money from Bitmain. So, like, the nasty game theory of it is, like, Bitmain wants to look smaller than they are.
Yeah.
You can reroute miners pointed at your pool to other pools without them knowing. And that gets even harder to detect with Stratum V2, by the way. And you can make them all mine to small pools that you can then block withhold and make them run underwater and then all have to borrow from you. So this is like, there's every reason Bitmain would do something like that, unless like ethics prevents them from it, or like literally just the competence of doing it. So as far as like, there's a lot of evidence to support that that's what's going on. Because Brains recently went on a really, really bad run of luck again, and it was statistically just so unlikely that they could go that long. It was like, I can't remember what it was, but it was almost like 10 days, I think, without a block, and they're like 7 exahash or something. Like, that was ridiculous. And then when people started talking about it, it's correct. But during that period, they would have had to borrow so many tens of millions of dollars from Bitmain to cover that.
Well, you keep saying borrowing from Bitmain. Like, there's not any actual proof that they're going to like.
Well, it's known. It's called Ant Alpha. That's the program you have to subscribe to be like a borrower, to run a small FPPS pool. Like, that's the mechanism for it. It's a known thing. It's not like,
but
it's
is
not
that
a pure conspiracy
Is that
theory.
specifically for borrowing for funds for FPPS pools, or that's just for funding ASIC orders? I thought
That I don't know. I don't know.
I thought Ample was like venture arm, but like it's like Ample Bitmain. So
at the very
it's
least, like to what
I just call it all Ant-Main.
Yeah.
That's
At
the
the-
general,
Yeah.
the general sports.
I don't
ball.
pretend to know all the different organizations.
at the
there.
very least, your point though about specifically proxy pools being beholden to Antpool and the Bitmain ecosystem is something that is definitely happening.
Certainly.
And just a little more color on that. For people who might not understand how some of these mining pools work, like full paper share mining pools will often sell their hash rate to different pools. Like sometimes they'll go to Bitmain or Antpool. Sometimes they'll try to go to another one that's maybe not under the Bitmain mafia, but that's actually hard to find.
That's a good point.
And like they're basically, just for listeners, when they're selling their hash rate, they're getting a certain amount for that hash rate from Antpool, for a specific amount of time, and then they're paying their customers on top of that. So it's like in the same way that they pay customers based on hash price for FPPS, is like the FPPS pools also kind of sell their hash rate based on that same kind of market value.
Yeah,
which is interesting. And I think that's like a key distinction between the FPPS market and what Oceanpool is trying to do with a PPLNS like system, right? I just think that needs to be highlighted for people. It's like, you're not, like, mining pools have tried to find ways to like totally desystematize the risk of block variance. And at a certain point, like you said, you can't necessarily have a free lunch.
Well, yeah, that's the overall concept then. I mean, it's unrelated to your direct question, but it's just like the more people you stick between the blockchain and your income as a miner, the more leeching is going to happen. Like there's like, if you're looking for like an intuitive, how can that be? How can Ocean pay more? It doesn't make sense. Like, there's got to be a catch here. I'm like, no, it's like, if you're 50% of Ocean's pool and we find a block, you get 50% of what's in that block. There's no way to add any cherries on top of that unless you literally just start putting in out of band transactions with, ridiculous transaction fees just to, make the block more lucrative than it would be from the pure mempool. So that's where it comes from, right?
Yeah.
So, but with regards to bootstrapping, it can. I'm surprised we've hit 100% as many times as we've had with such a small amount of hash rate, because you can miss difficulty adjustments entirely when your hash rate's too low, and then that's gone forever, right? Like, so, but we've been all right, and luckily, if we can get to around 5 exahash, the variance, as I said, it'll be low enough for almost any miner to handle at that point. Unless you're like a daily power bill guy, which there are some miners like that, then I can see you like, but that's a product, right? I can see you being like, I have to pay my energy every 24 hours. The blockchain is random. Can you weather the storm for me? Like, why would that person be like, yeah, I'll do it and I'll charge you 0.5%? Like, that just doesn't seem viable to me, because you just need so much money to weather the storm. And, you got to deal with variable transaction fee environments too. And that's going to get worse and worse as a percentage of like, mining income is going to get less and less predictable as we move from subsidy to transaction fees, which means like making guarantees becomes even more of a risky thing to do. Yep. So at some point, miners can be like, I can take on all of the pain and suffering of it, and I'll just get more in the long run.
Yeah.
So it's basically just that.
In the competitive world of Bitcoin mining, one name stands out: CleanSpark, America's Bitcoin miner. At CleanSpark, efficiency isn't just a goal, it's our standard. Our sophisticated facilities are built and led by expert teams who care about Bitcoin and the communities we work in. Scale, we've mastered it. Our large-scale operations have set us apart in the industry as examples of community-oriented building. Our track record speaks for itself. We navigate the complexities of the new economy with precision and with skill, continuously achieving operational milestones. Curious about how we do it? We invite you to discover the story behind CleanSpark's success at cleanspark.com.
I think people do miss like the importance of like the bips here with Bitcoin, because like every amount of money does matter at a certain point, especially for financial services. Everything is about margin. And for pools, like we kind of hand wave me like 2% of rewards is from transaction fee, but like 2% in traditional finance is a ton of money. Like, you know, they're measuring things much, much smaller. And so I've been kind of waiting for like the Bitcoin mining market to like care about that more. I think like people who work in the financial side or operators do know it, but like your ordinary plebs are probably not thinking about it too much. From a Foundry standpoint, just to go back to that, how do you get a miner to leave Foundry and go to something like Ocean, or a miner to leave something like Amp Pool and come to you? Like, what's been sort of the thing besides the money? Because they seem to be like very tight and hard to like get some of these guys to care.
Well, there's the raw income of it.
Yeah.
You have to trade that off with the variance, right? Yeah. Like if we earn you more, but it takes us a month to do it, that might have financial consequences for you that are worse than if you just took on like the decreased variance that was less overall. So there's the money angle, there's the ideological angle. Like every single like BitX, like enthusiast guy. Well, I'm not going to say every single. I'm sure there's someone out there that dislikes us for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But plebs are happy about it, right? Yeah. They understand the transparency of it. Like I can see what I should have got. I can verify everything poolside. I don't need to make an account. I don't need to KYC. Like all of that stuff is like gross to like your average Bitcoiner ideologically, and we're the only real pool out there that allows you to not have to do that stuff. And it's 0%. So getting people from Foundry, generally, like my experience with people that mine on Foundry has been that no amount of government, it's like govern me harder daddy meme. It's like they literally want it. Like it's not just like, they're just like, look, I can't mine with you until you give me a place for me to upload my passport information. I'm like, look, we don't work that way. Like we don't want to work that way. And you know, there's also these regulatory things and like requirements that, you know, voluntary things like SOC compliance that, you know, I got into like a fun little back and forth with Pierre Rochard over this on Twitter a little while ago. Like someone posted a meme. One is like him in a cowboy hat, like, you know, some based Bitcoin statement. Now it's him in a suit. Like, I need you to have SOC compliance if we're going to move over to you. Like and the thing is like, there's I thought SOC compliance was like, give some bureaucrat $100,000 and then they'll give you a rubber stamp and it's done. But it isn't. They make you do stuff like install CrowdStrike on all employee laptops and bullshit like that. And we're like, unfortunately, this is actually worse. Like it's a government bureaucrat's idea of what InfoSec is. And that's as bad as you might think it is. Like, I don't want to do that. Like Ocean's back end, like we don't have anyone's data to give. Like we don't ask for it in the first place. And again, it's just so shit. Like publicly traded companies can tick boxes and be like, we've done our due diligence. Like they had SOC compliance, they're secure. If there's a breach, it's not on us. You can't sue us because we did our due diligence. And what's annoying about that is it's just not real. It's all security theater. Like so, to get back to the point, a lot of publicly traded miners, that was their hang up. They're just like, look, you guys are like wild. Yeah. Like we have no idea. And I'm like, look, if you're a publicly traded miner, every time Ocean finds a block, you have the money. We will never touch it. Yeah. And we can never roll loaded dice because you can verify everything that happens on the pool and how it relates to, you know, the payouts. So if you're 50% of the pool, every time we find a block, you'll get exactly 50% of what was in the block and we will never have touched it. Like we're a very dumb liaison for people to hash. Like it's a dumb thing. It's not an intelligent, you know, thing that can discriminate and like play silly games and stuff like that. It's just like dumb, like the Bitcoin network is, right? Like money goes from A to B. I don't care if it's $1 billion or, you know, someone opening a lightning channel for 1 million sats. Like it doesn't, it's all the same to Bitcoin. It's a dumb network, right? And that's why it's non-discriminatory. It's the same with Ocean. And it's the sophistication that they want to put on us there's like, no, that's how centralization creeps in. Like we want you making templates. We want you taking custody of everything. We want you like signing Lightning credentials if you're a small miner. Which means you also need to run a node, by the way. You can't just use like some LSP wallet. Like you actually probably will be able to use Phoenix soon because they have Bolt 12 now.
Okay.
But yeah, there's an interoperability issue there because we use Core Lightning and even though it's anyway, I digress.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, we don't have a Lightning show yet because I don't like following up on L&D updates. But
Lightning's great.
Lightning's great, but following it is
it's
headache.
horrible. Like
it's a headache.
Yeah.
A trip.
So you've been in a coma for the last 6 seconds. Oh wait, I can't wait to catch up on Lightning development.
So one of the things you were really kind of hitting on there was this tension between like the institutional mining scene and the kind of garage shop hobbyist mining scene, which I feel like Ocean has that kind of like, I'm running 5 S9s in my like basement and I've got my ducts taped up so I can pipe the heat into my house. And I see like
pleb miners.
And I think one of the things that one of the benefits of a mining pool for many miners, not just the monetary benefit of having steady income, but it's also that everything is abstract. Like you don't have to build your own template, you don't have to make your own node, you don't have to do any of the stuff that you used to actually have to do when mining was much more in the shadows and not an institutionalized thing yet. All of that to say, I think a lot of these institutional miners they just want to make money. They don't care about any of the stuff that most pleb miners care about. How big do you think the audience is for Ocean in terms of like guys who want to be building their own templates, guys who want to be like running their own Lightning node so they can get payouts in Lightning? Like how addressable is that market?
So I think those 2 examples you gave are the opposite kind of miners. So the guys that want to get Lightning payouts like direct and stuff, they're necessarily the smallest miners because we can't do massive, like we're not going to make a payout to Hut 8 over Lightning. Like that would just break everything. But conversely, the miners that want to build their own templates are the biggest guys because they're like exchanges that have a blockchain footprint that they need every month. And they're countries that run Bitcoin infrastructure. Like I'm being abstract here deliberately, but this has all actually happened. Like these are conversations that have happened. And they're like, look, we don't want to rely on an American or a Chinese pool to always put our transactions in. We run Bitcoin infrastructure in another country, and we need access to block space. And it's not just Bitcoin isn't like in a vacuum where like if you pay one sat more than the other guy, you get in the blockchain. Like there are actual political things, right? So some people are like, we need to guarantee access to block space. And then there's also just plain marketing, right? Like I want my name on the blue timeline on mempool space. Right now, like you can get it in the Coinbase, right? But to have mempool infer from that, what's actually written there, we've been working on that and we're pretty close to it. So if you're, I don't know, like if MicroStrategy mined a block or something like that and they did it on Ocean, it would just say MicroStrategy, like buy Ocean or something like that. I don't know exactly how we'll word it, but the point is everyone's stoked about it because we're going to be like, you can have a bunch of miners on Ocean and it's whoever made the block deserves the credit for it. They're the one that found it and they're the one that created it. They just don't get all the reward for it because they're splitting from everyone else trying to do the same thing. So it's actually solo mining with reward splits. Like you are really a solo miner at that point, but you're just dealing with the variance. That's all a pool should really do. It just liaises miners and gets rid of variance. Miners like pools deciding what goes in the blockchain and taking custody of all new coins and KYCing everyone that connects and all that stuff. That's like a massive overstepping of boundaries of what pools do. And it makes them targets, right? Like if Ocean had 100% of the hash rate once we're post template, the worst thing they could do is come to us and rob the contents of the next block or start kicking miners off the pool or whatever. But again, we don't know who any of our miners are. And if we did that, we'd have one block where that's it, Ocean's dead and everyone leaves. And that's it. Whereas if you had someone put a gun to Foundry's head or Bitmain's head and they start OFAC complying or something like that, are any other publicly traded miners going to leave over that? I don't think so. I think the price would go down a bit and then actually shoot up. And it would be like when Silk Road was shut. everyone's like, Silk Road shut. Oh no, that's Bitcoin's killer use case. Actually, we just got rid of the whole drug association, and now now we're maybe on the path to legitimacy. So the price went down and then up. And I think if centralized pools started OFAC complying and stuff like that, everyone's like, oh, miners will just leave if they do that. I'm like, plebs would, but publicly traded miners that
they won't.
First off, they can't, because the other pools they might go to don't have the SOC compliance and all that stuff. And second off, they probably would welcome it. Is Michael Saylor really bothered if we start blacklisting Iranian UTXOs? He might understand, he might be on board with the ideology enough to know that's probably not a good thing to compromise neutrality like that. But I don't know. When it comes down to it, I think the price wouldn't tank, because what I wouldn't sell my Bitcoin if that happened, because where else am I going to go? I'm not going to buy ETH. I'm not going to buy a house. I'm not going to buy gold. I'm going to stay in Bitcoin, and it might just be boiling frog syndrome. So this is, I think everyone would be. It's not 2015 where everyone's a cypherpunk and we're there's a pool that did something bad, or it ghash.io got above 40% and we all just left. I don't think that would happen these days. I think as long as Bitmain carries on going, don't worry, we're not really that big, and everyone knows that we're actually, all the smaller pools are really just us. Everyone's like, yeah, fine, I won't pay any attention. I think the ideology is really, really gone from the mining side. So I'm not don't worry, we'll all just fix everything if and when they do something. I'm like, well, the time is now. So if you're not moving now, the water's already boiling, the frogs are already in it. I'm no one's left yet. And I have to just keep the optimism and say Ocean's only been around for 5 minutes and it's not particularly viable yet for smaller miners, right? But it will be within weeks or months with multiple exahash, finding several blocks a day. Variance will be pretty much gone at that point from the perspective of most miners. I'm I do expect a significant chunk to move over. And if we can get 20-30% of the network on Ocean, it can continue to grow. Like I said, if we can't really do any damage, given the way the pool is done, anything we do would just kill the business immediately. And there's not a lot we can do. That's the point. If a miner is huge and they're censoring and all that stuff on Ocean, and we don't, they just turn themselves into a solo miner very quickly. At the end of the day, they're the ones doing the proof of work, and they're the ones with the hash rate. It wouldn't be Ocean attacking with a whole bunch of hash rate that was beholden to it, because we can't. We just can't make our miners do stuff. And we should probably talk about the way the template construction is working, because everyone knows about Stratum v2, right? And I guess maybe you had that in your notes, but I'd like to get into it.
I have one question first, if we can, before that.
Sure.
So I had Zach Bradford of CleanSpark on the show yesterday, and he said that they are going to launch a pool at some point. Marathon obviously has their pool. What do you think about corporate pools from that stance, and how do you think them being public companies with shareholders who have to maximize value is going to affect how they run their pool operations?
So I don't like them using the word pool in that context, because that's deliberately not what a pool is. They are just Mara is just a giant solo miner. I don't know why it isn't called Mara Pool anymore. It's just called Mara, which is good, because it isn't a pool. A large solo miner is not a pool. It's a miner. So if CleanSpark is way big enough to to just do their own solo mining. I just don't know why they'd call it CleanSpark Pool, because that implies that it's collaborative hashing between multiple parties, and it isn't. If they open it up to other people to join, fine, but it'll be just another corporate pool. It will require compliance and KYC and all that stuff for any participants. And as far as I'm concerned, they have no incentive to do that. Mara did that and stopped doing it because it was probably a pain in the butt, KYCing all their users.
It's probably really annoying.
So it's just solo mining. I don't there's a bunch of the nomenclatures all got confused. There's what most people consider solo pools are really just lottery mining. Someone else is still constructing the template. They're defining the reward split. They pay themselves 2% for running a Stratum server that you point your miner to that gives you 98% of the rewards. You run your BitAxe for 10 years or whatever, and you get lucky and find a block. That's not solo mining. We call that lottery mining, right? It's not a pool because you're not collaborating with anyone else. So solo pool is a contradiction in terms, and there's 3 of them, which is really annoying. Then there's all these corporate pools that call themselves pools that are just solo miners. And so I'm so what Ocean wants to do is we'll be a pool in like there should be one thing that defines being a pool, which is multiple people splitting rewards.
Yeah.
But making templates and paying ourselves and then giving you money from another pot, that shouldn't be synonymous with what a pool is.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that to be a pool, right?
It's hot out this summer, and your ASICs might need some tender love and care. Contact Vitamine today for on-site ASIC repair. With Bitmain certified repair technicians, Vitamine has you covered, including repair shops in Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma, and Washington State. Or have them travel to your site and train your team. PSUs, immersion tanks, hashboards, and more. If you think ASIC repair, think Vitamine. And for a limited time only, use code MININGPOD to get 20% off your hashboard repair. Again, that's code MININGPOD to get 20% off your hashboard repair. Contact Dan today at dan@vmasic.com and let him know that the Mining Pod sent you.
Do you have any thoughts on like the corporate side if, say, CleanSpark does launch their own solo mine or pool? I'm going to use the word pool because it's easier right now.
If they start solo mining.
If they start solo mining and they start doing stuff like ordinals to Slipstream to whatever it looks like, how do you think that changes the landscape for Bitcoin? Do you think that's going to add another layer of things that you guys are fighting against, or are you not too worried about it?
I'm not. I think the block space is it's gonna get weird.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of a foregone conclusion, right? And I don't know how that looks. I don't know. Like I don't know. Is it a case of if or when, not if? Like the idea that we can have a cohesive mempool, like because people still talk about the mempool, right? And someone will be pedantic and be like, "Well, there is no the mempool. Everyone has a different mempool." The reason we have to be pedantic right now about that is because there basically is the mempool that we all basically agree on, because there isn't that much weirdness going on. And Slipstream was kind of the first example of how weird it can get. There is no the mempool when you have Slipstream, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what happens. Like you can have orphaned blocks happen if Mara finds a block with all these weird transactions in it, and then it gets there's a reorg because that happens like every now and again. Then all those transactions backslide into everyone's mempools and they become accessible to everyone. That's weird. I don't know what to expect from that. Like I don't know if miners have actually tweaked their nodes enough to start grabbing non-standard transactions from.
No, they wouldn't be able to.
Why not?
Like,
they could if they just tweak. If they're running Libra Relay or something.
Yeah, for sure. But like specifically, like Slipstream, doesn't follow those standardness rules. So the other miners like couldn't, unless they had tweaked them the same way, they couldn't actually include them in a block, right? Like
they can. They just by default they wouldn't. But it's perfectly doable because they're all consensus valid, right? So they can grab them. And if they're also probably really lucrative, right? Like I think initially Mara was like accelerating everything at like 0 sats a byte. And then that was like a gift to all the FPPS pools because they can now lower their average payout, even though they're bringing in more income than the average. And Mara was like, "You're all crazy if you're going to do that, like, or unethical or whatever." And they said, "We advise you in your FPPS calculations to exclude our blocks because they're not reflective of what miners can expect."
Yeah.
But now they're doing the opposite, it seems, where they like make the accelerated transactions pay way above the going rate for block space. And that bankrupts the FPPS pools if they include them because they're not, the average is going to be based on money they never get.
Yeah.
So either way, like FPPS, I think this is again like the kindred spirits with Foundry. They're like, it's a pain in the butt doing FPPS and it's definitely a dying system.
Yeah,
like
I've heard that from them.
Yeah. So they're like, it's a pain, we hate doing it, and it's not going to work much longer. So block space is going to get weird. And I think that's great. I want there to be weirdness in the block space. I don't want it to be like completely predictable, and because that implies centralization, right?
Yeah.
That's why that's why like Knots has everything variable and Core doesn't. Like it should be, mempools are supposed to be different and blocks are supposed to contain different stuff. Like if it's all just like every mempool looks the same as every other mempool except for network latency and stuff like that, then you're basically centralized, right?
Yeah. Let's go to pools or templates. You want to talk about templates?
Yeah. So template construction, so I'm talking about Stratum actually.
Yeah.
So everyone knows Stratum v1's terrible. Stratum v2's been the sort of let's fix everything for like forever. It's gone through different iterations. It was called Beta Hash for a while. Like it's been under the purview of the Brains guys, and I think Blockstream had it at one point, and Matt Corallo has been on and off, and it's just like been around forever. But in our opinion, it's just the exact opposite of what's needed. It was always just kind of the wrong approach.
Stratum V2.
Yeah.
Why do you say it's the wrong approach?
Because fundamentally, the templates still get made by the pool, and the miner just has a mechanism for requesting substitutions, the job negotiation. The whole point of what we do is the template gets created miner side, and they request from the pool what the correct Coinbase split's supposed to be. So it's the exact opposite approach. And then there's all the technical element. Like, I'm not talking about the encryption and all the no-brainer stuff that SV2 does. It's good. I'm just talking about
specifically how the templates are built.
Yeah, like I just don't think it's gonna manifest that way, and it's also like really hungry and bloated and just years of technical debt inside Stratum. So we just started again, something fresh, totally C, not even C++, just like you can run this thing on a Raspberry Pi 4. Like, in fact, it's way less resource intensive than what the node would require. So it's obviously got to sit on top of a Bitcoin node, but it sits on top, it constructs templates, it reaches out to Ocean. Probably every 30, 40 seconds, it's getting an update on what the Coinbase is supposed to contain. As long as you keep submitting proofs that whatever you worked on had the correct Coinbase split, your shares carry on going towards payout splits from other blocks from other miners. So we're centralizing the one element of P2Pool that doesn't scale, which is every single miner has to run the entire pool locally, which is not scalable. I just talked about the resource requirements of running Ocean.
Right.
But what we do it transparently, so everyone can verify it, that it's being done correctly. But
the Coinbase split specifically.
Yeah. So Ocean's saying that guy did 20% of the work, that guy's doing 40%, that guy's doing 3%. Our Coinbase splits reflect that. And then as long as you're requesting that and actually provably using it in your templates, you are entitled to carry on getting splits from everyone else. The minute you stop doing that, oops, you're solo mining again. That's it. So you can't trick the pool by using a fake Coinbase split where you pay yourself everything but carry on collaboratively reward splitting. The minute you do that, every share you submit to the pool is invalid. Not consensus level invalid, but these shares don't count towards a split because you're mining and paying yourself everything. You're not rolling straight dice, right? It's very simple actually. It's pretty elegant. The hard part that everyone wants to sort of advise on is how do you deal with what it gets contained in blocks. Like, you can't have one miner that keeps mining empty blocks and another miner that's getting the best transaction fees ever somehow and then split them the same. Like, that seems unfair, right? So we came up with sensible guardrails around that, and they're very defensible. We can't let it be totally laissez-faire, right? That was a given. Like, ideologically, is this permissible? And then we realized it has to be, because Antpool can come along and mine empty blocks on Ocean, like with literally no subsidy even, like literally completely empty blocks, not just no transaction fees, but no subsidy either. But they can be 50% of our hash rate while they're doing it, and it's valid blocks because you can go below subsidy, you just can't go above it. And then they can be 50% of our pool, getting 50% of our rewards, while the other 50% of miners keep having to share these garbage blocks which don't have any money in them. So we owe it to our miners to put a guardrail in place there.
What is the guardrail?
So it's like complicated. There's a whole bunch of things. But basically the principle of it is, like, a good example is someone that wants to mine 300 kilobyte blocks, right? There's definitely ideologues out there that agree that 300 kilobytes is the right size. Like, I pretty much agree with that too. But the point is, if you were to solo mine 300 kilobyte blocks, you'd make less money than if you solo mined 1 megabyte or 1.2 megabytes, right? Because you literally just can't fit as many transaction fees in. So we make it so that you're not going to subsidize it by collaboratively mining and enjoying the benefit of miners that mine larger blocks and having them subsidize your ideology. So you'll be penalized for it, but you won't make less than if you were solo mining. You'll still get the reduced variance, but you're not going to make more ultimately than you would if you were just solo mining. So this to us felt like the most sensible guardrail. So you can still do what you want to do. You're not going to lose any money for it, but you're not getting other people to pay for your ideology, because that's where it crosses the line. So there's basically something along the lines of an Ocean default. It's going to be fairly loose. And if you go too far away from it, it starts to become an issue, right? So like if we do something too tight with the guardrails, then it defeats the point, right? Like everyone's going to want to just use Ocean's exact recommendation to get 100%. Can't do that either, right? So we have to leave a little bit of wiggle room. But again, I don't want like Coinbase becoming a big miner. I shouldn't say Coinbase because it confuses the issue because we keep talking about Coinbase transactions. Like what's another, like Binance, all right? Binance wants to mine. They have an on-chain footprint. They pay 0 sats per byte in all of those transactions. They put them in blocks they find. And rather than pay for that solo mining, they get everyone else to kind of pay for that through overall slightly less block rewards. That's not fair. So we have to limit that somehow, but we can't be so tight with it that it's like, oh, if I even change one transaction from Ocean's recommended thing, then I get penalized and it sucks. And if we do that, trying to like eke every last sat out of it, it becomes like kind of a LARP again. So I don't want to do that. And I don't think we'll do it. But I also just don't think this is decentralization, right? This is the fear of decentralized templates, is that other people control you with finding silly blocks with like the N word in the Coinbase text and stuff like that. People can do that. And I'll actually show up on mempool space. I'm really looking forward to someone doing that. Like a BitX guy spends 10 years trying to write like Hitler was right.
Just to troll. Yeah, just to troll.
Someone's going to do it. I'm really looking forward to it. Like it's going to be the best day in Bitcoin ever. Like mempool space have already agreed that like, yeah, that's decentralization. But like when it comes to the money thing, like just I think decentralization, people fear like if you want max revenue from the blockchain, you have to be centralized, right? Like Mara can max what they put in the block space because they're centralized and they can offer a service. We can never compete with that because we're decentralized, but it's not there are other elements in that trade-off, right? I do think if it becomes like spammy protocols and unregistered securities that use Bitcoin's block space, ultimately the only way there's a universe where the only way you can do that is with Ocean templates. Because if you try and do it with a centralized US pool, they'll keep getting told this is an unregistered security and you're not allowed. So this was my favorite, like fate loves, irony and all that, is like we end up in a world where all of the spam is only in Ocean blocks because it's illegal to do it anywhere else and Ocean's decentralized. That was my favorite thing. That's just like everyone going, well, we should just like bow our heads and like we cannot control this thing. That was my favorite like world. And I think it probably happens, but it's also like the decentralization of it isn't strictly a thing where you make less money because it's also the only free thing. So if block space becomes regulated, Ocean is the only place you can do what you want with it because there's no direct control over it. So I think ultimately that will be more lucrative, but it is like explaining why Bitcoin's better than PayPal. Like to a lot of people, that is really actually not easy to explain. Like PayPal's cheap and fast, and if you don't use the protection thing, like I really can send you like $1,000 on PayPal right now for zero money, and it's quick and it's good. And I'm like, yeah, but they might cancel you one day. And you're like, well, I'll worry about that when it happens. And I'm like, well, if you worry about it now, you'll be in a better space, actually. Like the same with Bitcoin, right? Explaining Bitcoin to no coin is like frustrating like that. That's how I feel like it is with Ocean too. I'm like, if you keep going for like, Antmain or Foundry, if that's it, like eventually that will bite us all in the ass. Like, so you be proactive with it, change it. And then ultimately, we're coming to the end, I feel like, but I feel like I want to be in a place where it's like if governments or malicious entities come to block template designers and they say, you've got to do this or you can't do that. I want it to be a thing where rather than they don't do it because of virtue signaling, where they're like, we were going to be OFAC compliant, but we said no. And we're all like, oh, thanks, that's good. And it's a PR win. That's what happened with Mara the first time, right? They did it and then they stopped because of backlash. I just want someone to do it, actually do OFAC compliance, and for everyone to laugh at them and be like, a waste of time. Like there are thousands of people making templates. You're never going to have any success censoring the chain. Like right now, it's just... we're not censorship resistant. People just aren't censoring yet. That's the point. So I want to get to a place where it's like, please try and censor us so we can laugh at you. I want to get to there.
I want to finish up with a few questions about like future of Bitcoin and just get your take on it. So OPCAT, interest in that, anything else, and then how you've kind of seen like the last 6 to 12 months push from a lot of different orgs that typically are not interested in Bitcoin kind of getting back into interest with Bitcoin. A lot of like altcoiners jumping back in, launching new like proof of stake protocols on top of Bitcoin, all that sort of stuff. And how are you seeing that as someone who's like more pure play and ideological about these things? And then what do you think is going to occur in sort of Bitcoin dev landscape, or what would you want to occur in the future?
Oh man, there's a lot there. There's so many.
Yeah.
There's so many questions.
Yeah.
Huge topic.
10 minutes left, so we'll just
Yeah, I'm with you.
rip through it as you see fit. But
Yeah, I think like OPCAT specifically is like, it was kind of a relief when Matt Corallo was like, I find it impossible to reason about this thing and like, you know, to extrapolate on that. It's like, I cannot figure out all the implications of this thing.
Yeah.
And I think there's a humility to that is like a necessary part of the conversation. Like, and I said this at BTC Prague, I had like a panel with Lavara and those guys. And I'm like, look, I was like a massive proponent of SegWit and Taproot, and they had unintended consequences that I'm going to have to say, yeah, I didn't figure this out at the time. And it sucks that it happened. Like I know that the witness discount created two kinds of transactions, and that's not good. Like, it shouldn't be cheaper to store data than it is to do a financial transaction. That's a mistake.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand the implication of that at the time. So that's humbling, and it makes us humble if we're going to be like honest with ourselves. So when it comes along with like, here's a new sexy opcode that does this and that, and you Luddites are just afraid of merging new stuff and you're afraid of change, I'm like, look, man, that's not wise.
Yeah.
That's just like, that's arrogant. And it's like, you know, the difference between intelligence and wisdom. So when Saylor came out and he's like, stop trying to play God, stop fucking with perfect money. Sorry if this is like a no swearing podcast.
You're good.
All right. And I'm like, that's actually, there's wisdom in that.
Yeah.
Like, there's always going to be unintended consequences. I'm up for rolling the dice, but I feel like currently what's going on, I did a video on my channel called Bitcoin Pretend Meritocracy, where I'm talking about kind of everyone's idea that Bitcoin Core is this like immune from politics entity where like everything is done purely based on merit, and there's no like politics or like, you know, little cliques of clubs and stuff, which is actually the reality of it. I mean, that's not unique to Core. It's like any human organization, right? So if like that was the thing amongst the CTV people where they're like, Jeremy Rubin proposed it, so that's why it's not getting in. It's not because of like personal stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you would say that because you're frustrated and you want it in. And they're like, if Peter Wool had proposed CTV, it would have been ages ago. I'm like, that's true, but maybe that's just because he tends to propose better stuff than you. Maybe, I don't know, but like it's some of both, right? So I'm like, I would like to see a covenant in there. I do believe in what they do, but like on balance, all the political stuff is like what actually matters here. And it's really dumb that it's about politics and not technical stuff. But like, we can get SegWit and Lightning, and you can have less than 1% of Bitcoiners actually using Lightning, and then less than 1% of those Lightning users actually running a node and doing it in a way that isn't really dumb, like paying on-chain fees every single time you send a Lightning transaction, which is like what Moon does and stuff. Like, I'm like, that should tell us something, right? So if we come up with covenants, coin pools and timeout trees and all this stuff, like the idea I have of anyone actually using any of this stuff the way it's supposed to be is like zero at this point. Like, I'm sorry, it's just people will just go for centralized, easy solutions because that's what people are like. And then you have the trade-offs, like what are the unintended consequences of all these covenant proposals? Because there are some, and that's all right. But if the current community is just unable to agree that things are broken and won't fix them, then I'm like, well, then we can't afford to take the risk. Like, I will definitely roll the dice with like even LN-Hearts, which is 3 covenant proposals rolled into one. I would gladly roll the dice on it because I really like what covenants do on paper. But everyone pushing for that thing is also just completely gaslighting about what happened with, you know, the op false op if thing, where you can just stash endless amounts of data in fake transactions, right? And create, you know, massive bloating of the UTXO set. And like, we lost a whole class of hardware off what happened the last year. Like, you can't run a Raspberry Pi with an SSD anymore. Like, it will take you a week. Like, no, sorry, way longer than that. It's around 11 days to sync up the network. And that's like 9 of those days are the last year. And a lot of that's assumed valid running out, but a lot of it is just we went from 90 million UTXOs to 200 million. And just that sheer amount of in, out is like horrible for a Raspberry Pi, sure. Like, but I'm sorry, that was really useful that we had so many people with Raspberry Pis running nodes. And if we carry on at this rate, it's going to go up another 100 million every year for all these useless UTXOs that are just at the dust limit, which ironically, the dust limit is a spam filter enforcing it. So like the whole thing is so incongruent where I'm like, so like long story short, like, I would love to, in a perfect world, I want to see the Covenants upgrades.
Okay.
In reality, I don't think they're going to end up doing anything.
Yeah.
And I think prediction wise, I just don't think they're going to end up. I think there's too much.
You think there's too much deadlock and stalemate?
I think so. Yeah, I think like there's a reason no one ever released a UASF for CTV and stuff. Like at one point I was going to do it like with I don't know, Shinobi or Moon Settler or like that floppy disk guy with like the endless zeros in his thing, but he kind of went nuts, right? I don't know what happened to him. So I don't know, something like that. I don't think it's going to, I'm pretty not particularly optimistic about it. Like I think something like Liquid is like the dumb, but actually, like if it's stupid but it works, then it's not stupid. That to me is Liquid. I think Liquid's amazing for. I'm not affiliated or anything. I just think people are building on top of that and having a good experience. Like so, DCA buy like $3 worth of Bitcoin every day, and when you finally hit like $500 or something, swap from Liquid into Bitcoin, make an actually justifiably large UTXO. To me, that's like a fine model. It works. Like you're trusting an 11 and 15, is it multi-sig?
Yeah.
Like. So what? Like they could rug us at one point, but you were never keeping large amounts in there. Like that to me is an acceptable way to onboard. And like you've got Lightning to switch between all of these layers and like ways. I think we're kind of converging on some sort of way of.
Do you think there's something to be said about using kind of something like Liquid as like an enterprise solution? Because you were talking about, you can't really imagine how people would maybe use Covenants like a year or so from now.
I can imagine it. I just don't think they will.
Right. That's what I mean. So like doing it in a way where it's actually self-sovereign, like probably very few people are going to do it. But Covenants being implemented by exchanges or other like wallets or other service providers will probably eventually happen if we get them. But is there an argument to be made that you just keep something like that on Liquid and you just like let that be kind of like an enterprise sidechain layer and you could just settle back to Bitcoin? Keep all of the fancy stuff on something like that.
Well, the like killer use case for Covenants sort of obviates the need for using Liquid, so I think they're kind of rivals in that regard.
Well, I guess that's what I meant is like just having Covenants on something like Liquid on the side chain that you can easily control and not actually activating it on the main chain. And
well,
just
they're there, right? CAT is active on Liquid.
That's what I mean. Like, is there a case to be made for just keeping all of that stuff on a side chain and not actually bringing it to the main chain and just like letting whoever wants to implement it use a solution like that?
That's a tough question to answer. I think that's I haven't thought about that honestly, and I want to think about it before I just sort of like sort of improvise on it here. Like that's a really good question. So definitely we'll think about it. Because there's like a trade. There's one negative thing I can think of there that you don't want to incentivize too many people being on the side chain rather than on the main chain.
Right.
Like because the Covenants don't offer the same amount of security, but they're fundamentally backed by a federated, centralized thing. Right. Like they're not. Yeah, I mean, but like I said, they are competitors, right? So there's a reason Grubels and Adam, like from Blockstream, are like two of the most hardcore people bashing CTV, and like there's a motivation that, like, I love Adam and I love Grubels, so I don't want to like.
But they have an invested interest. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't like it for whatever reason. So I think they're trying to get that sort of fancy pants behavior that's possible on Liquid to only be on Liquid. But again, I don't think Liquid's like getting the 11 key holders to do something malicious on Liquid just feels so unlikely to me.
Yeah,
like it's a really solid thing. Like, and again, like Lightning, just use it for small amounts. And if the worst happens, it wasn't your main stash, right? Like keep your main stash at like a legacy address. Don't even use SegWit if you want to be that like Luddite. There are people that do that.
Yeah, no doubt.
I think we can wrap there. Mechanic, thanks for joining the pod. Any last words or people you want to like direct people to Ocean or towards you?
Sure. Yeah, Ocean XYZ is the website. There's no accounts as mentioned, so you can mine. All you need is a Bitcoin address, and you put that in your miner. I'm at Grassfed Bitcoin on Twitter, and you can find my Noster and stuff. Yeah, and I have a YouTube channel too where I talk about some of this stuff too. And
It's good.
yeah, cool.
Watched it.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for
having me.
joining,
Yeah.
Mechanic. This is fun, man.
Yeah, thanks.